Nadhim Zahawi. Thank you very much for being on the programme this morning. Some pretty concerning statistics from the Royal College of GPs. White people twice as likely to have been vaccinated as black people, 3 times more likely than those who are mixed race. How concerned is the government, and why do you think there is this lower take-up in some communities?
Very concerned. So if you look at the ONS data, vaccine acceptance in the UK is incredibly high, which is very positive. 85% of adult population say they will very likely take the vaccine, but the 15% that are vaccine hesitant skew heavily towards BAME communities, and especially Afro-Caribbean and Black communities, and of course, other Asian BAME communities. So the NHS, throughout the whole deployment program, we have a standing daily equalities section that we go through and make sure we're targeting both with the national message, the regional message, and then the local message, the hyper-local message, and engaging with those faith leaders, community leaders. We've announced £23 million working with local government, because local government has a big part to play in this. Eleanor Kelly, who is the Chief Executive of Southwark Council, has joined us as COO of the deployment campaign. And we'll be saying more on this, on how we continue to make sure that we deliver the messages in the languages that people feel comfortable with as well. We're translating all the messages into 13 languages, from Arabic to Farsi to Urdu to Polish, across the board, so that we reach those hard-to-reach communities. Because as long as we make sure we reach them, those top 4 cohorts represent 88% of mortality. And as you heard from Andy Burnham, and I'm glad he agrees on the JCVI prioritization for phase 1, the top 9 cohorts is 99% of mortality. If one particular community remains unvaccinated, then the virus will seek them out and will go through that community like wildfire. And that's not something any of us wish to see, which is why we're spending a lot of time, a lot of resource in this area. And you'll hear more on this from me in the coming days as well.
Really concerning, of course. You did say last week, though, that the government isn't keeping a record of who's refusing to take the vaccine. If you don't keep the data, how can you actually tackle the problem?
So, Sophie, we keep ethnicity data, and we're publishing ethnicity data. We also know what the population is of the top 4 cohorts, and then the population of the top 9 cohorts. That is known to us. But because this country, as Boris Johnson quite rightly said, we don't mandate vaccination. We don't make it, we don't force it down people's throats. We do it by persuasion, by sharing information, by explaining to people how good it is for them to stay safe, for them personally and their family and their community. And so we know, obviously, levels of uptake, and therefore focus on those groups that we need to focus on to make sure we get the hard-to-reach groups, not just, of course, what we've had is a phenomenal response. 90% of over 75s have been vaccinated with the first dose. Very high levels of acceptance. That is the highest in the history of vaccination programs. Flu vaccines don't even get close to that figure. They're in the sort of high 80%, and that's fantastic. Okay. This is an important issue. We're focusing on it, and you will see more from us on this with the NHS to make sure we deliver for all the communities that we want to protect.
There are also concerns about anti-vaccine content online. There's a report out by Sky News today showing that social media companies are one of the key ways that anti-vaxxers, if you like, raise money and get the message out. Do social media companies need to do more to protect against anti-vaccine content?
They're doing quite a bit, but we continue to work with them. So we set up a unit in the Cabinet Office, a cross-government unit.
So they're doing enough then, you think?
No, I'm about to answer your question, Sophie. We set up a unit across government that looks at all the anti-vax messages and alerts the social media platforms to them to help take them down as quickly as possible. We want them to do as much as they can, as quickly as they can, and we continue to work with them very closely. But we can always do more because there is too much. I can tell you from my own community, I look at the Middle Eastern community and the conspiracy theories. They don't just use, obviously, Facebook and Twitter. They also use other platforms like WhatsApp and text messaging to get those anti-vax messages, those fake videos, fake information across. And we're working with the social media, not just on the platforms, but on the other channels that people may use to try and spread some of this fake information to prey on those who are worried and who may be hesitant, which is why we want them to get the real information from their GPs. That was a brilliant piece you've done there, because actually it's the practitioners. I've done numerous roundtables with Black and ethnic minority practitioners, nurses, doctors who've been jabbed themselves, because the best experience is from someone you trust that's already taken the vaccine.
Yeah, it does feel as if those frontline health workers are absolutely vital. I'm sorry to rush you, we've just got quite a lot to get through, but we've talked a lot about the concerns over take-up, but of course the vaccine rollout programme does seem to be going pretty well, very fast. A leaked letter from a government advisor this week said the vast majority of adults will have received a COVID jab by the end of May. So are we on track for that to happen?
Well, the limiting factor is vaccine supply. So vaccine supply remains finite. I can tell you that yesterday, between 11 and 12 o'clock, we almost got to 1,000 jabs a minute. We got to 979 jabs a minute. So the deployment infrastructure, of which GPs are absolutely the backbone of this whole deployment, with hospital hubs, national vaccination centres. Now we have 100 national vaccination centres and 200 pharmacies. The deployment infrastructure can do the volumes that we'll get through. I'm confident we'll meet our mid-February target of the top 4 cohorts. I'm also confident, because I have enough line of sight of the deliveries that are coming through, that we'll also meet the 1 to 9 cohorts by May, and we'll say more about that next week when we hit the first target, I hope. All goes well. It's a tough target, by the way. Many people who are clinically extremely vulnerable have to be reached by the GP. Some of them can't travel. We have to go to their home. We set up a drive-through in St Albans yesterday, and the emotion there was extraordinary. Sophie, people who are clinically extremely vulnerable shielding could come in their car and get that first dose. Was amazing.
Lots of people, of course, are going to be moving to get their second dose in the coming weeks. Given logistical challenges, given supply challenges that you mentioned, should we expect the pace to be slowing down a bit? And could that put the target of vaccinating all over 50s by the end of April at risk?
Well, it will vary, no doubt. And as I said, look, vaccine manufacture remains challenging. Any manufacturing process is challenging. I'm a chemical engineer by background, but as Patrick Vallance has said, there's never been a vaccine manufacturing process of a new vaccine without its challenges. But we see better stability now and greater volumes, but they will move around. Plus, as you quite rightly just pointed out, we are beginning obviously to store the second dose vaccine as well. So we will begin in March to do both more first dose, but of course then the second dose for both Pfizer and Oxford AstraZeneca.
Testing, obviously important as well. Government's going to be offering quick COVID tests to all workplaces with over 50 employees. What's the idea? When's it going to happen?
So both are important. It used to be to employers who have 250 workers. We've reduced that to 50 because we want it to become the norm that people, when they go to work, once we are over this, obviously, lockdown, then they can be tested rapidly. We've got the volumes in place. We've done a similar thing with local government and key workers. This is a really important point, Sophie, because vaccines are our way out of this pandemic, but coupled with vaccines is test, trace, and isolate in the way we're doing now in Woking. So we need to be really forensic because of these new variants, to go after them very rapidly and isolate them, and isolate those who are then who have the new variant, to quarantine, so that we can stamp out any new variants while we continue to vaccinate the nation.
Talking about the new variants, clearly a big concern for the government and everyone really. The Financial Times has reported this study of 2,000 people, which has shown the Oxford vaccine does seem to be less effective against the South African variant and has limited efficacy in protecting against mild and moderate disease. Have you seen this study and are you worried by it?
I spoke to Jonathan Van Tam this morning. Of course, the good news about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is sort of the flip side of that headline you've just quoted, is that it does protect against severe disease.
Well, hang on a minute, sorry. Does it at the minute, I understand that AstraZeneca believes that they're confident that it does, but that actually, because the median age of participants in this trial was 31, the fact that no one died or became seriously ill, they just don't know yet if it does.
Well, as I said, through their own trials, AstraZeneca is confident that it does effectively deal with serious illness, serious disease, and hospitalization. But to your very good point, and this is a really important point for your viewers, of course the virus will mutate, and the more we vaccinate, the more virus will attempt to survive and mutate even further. We have the world's best genomic sequencing ecosystem industry in the UK. So we are able to sequence the genomes of the mutations rapidly and then talk to the manufacturers. And you saw the deal we announced this week with CureVac, where we're going to be looking to manufacture the new variant of vaccine that deals with the variant of virus in the UK, the same way as the Prime Minister visited Scotland to look at Valneva, where that vaccine is a whole inactivated virus, so has much greater effectiveness, hopefully, on the virus. And that, again, future-proofs our country so that we know we can produce new variants of vaccine ready to revaccinate or boost the protection of the nation. This is all part of the strategy that the Prime Minister quite rightly pushed us both in Bays with the vaccine task force, but also in our thinking now that we have to not only vaccinate the nation and protect them, which is what he wants us to do rapidly, but also begin to think about, okay, well, what comes next? If the virus mutates, we have to be ready with the new variant of vaccine to deal with that virus.
Mutations clearly concern, South African variant clearly concern. What I don't really understand is, the government's so worried about the South African variant that you've told people in certain postcodes that it's imperative that they stay at home. So that means that people who live in Ealing or some postcodes in Worcester, for example, are told that they can't even leave their houses. They should get a test as quickly as possible. But someone can still actually travel back from South Africa as long as they don't get a direct flight and they don't even necessarily have to quarantine in a hotel. How does that work?
Well, I'll tell you exactly. So hotel quarantine is part of the overall control of our borders. It is one part, an important part, and that's coming on the 15th of February. But actually, the really important part is the passenger locator form, which allows to know exactly where you're staying, and of course, the departure testing that we've introduced. And of course, we've banned travel from 33 countries where we are worried about the mutations of the virus in those countries. So it is a combination of all those things. So if you come from any country, even now, you have to quarantine for 10 days. And of course, we will make sure that that is policed well, and it already is being policed much more strictly.
You're relying on people, though, aren't you? You're relying on their goodwill to do it if you don't put them up in hotels.
Well, no, the hotels is if you are a British national or a resident of this country and you're coming back from those countries of concern, the 33 countries, then we will put you in a quarantine hotel. But if you're coming to the United Kingdom for any other reason, you still have to quarantine. And the passenger locator form means the airline will not let you on if you don't have that filled in. And actually, it's an offence not to have it filled in and carries a fine with it, as well as, of course, the pre-departure test. So it is a combination of measures. Countries like Germany did the same thing in January. Canada did the same thing in January. All countries are looking at how to protect.
You're talking about the red list of countries, but the South African variant's been found in 41 countries. 29 of them aren't on the banned list, on the red list, if you like, travelling to the UK. The Brazilian variant, another variant of concern, found in 10 countries. 6 haven't been added to the red list. If you look at what SAGE warned on the 21st of January, they said that geographically targeted travel bans cannot be relied upon to stop the importation of new variants. So why aren't you imposing hotel quarantines for all travellers?
Well, because one, you already have to quarantine. It doesn't have to be in a hotel. We are saying that
But we know from Dido Harding that 20,000 people told to self-isolate, don't do it every day.
So well, at the moment, the test and trace is running at about 86% of people who are testing positive actually being contacted, 93 to 96% of their contacts being contacted, and the capacity is at 800,000 tests.
But my point is people don't always do what they're told.
And that's why there are fines associated with it. And also this rapid testing now. So one of the things that we are doing, if you look at what we've done in Worcestershire and in Woking as an example, is the ability to very rapidly put in the resource to test very small geographies. And we've learned that, by the way. We've learned because we've seen it done in other countries like Australia and elsewhere. So it's a combination of a mass vaccination program plus forensic rapid testing and 10-day quarantine with fines and with testing there and checking. You have to quarantine for 10 days, and we will be checking to make sure that that is happening. It's a combination of all those things that Sage said you have to deliver, because that's how you protect the country whilst we are vaccinated.
Sage also said that there's no point just targeting certain countries, putting them on the red list because of indirect travel, but also because of the lag between the emergence and identification of variants of concern. I mean, that's true, isn't it? I mean, you only have to look at the first wave where initially we were banning flights from China, but not from places like Spain or parts of Italy, where lots of people had the virus, but we just didn't know it at the time. Are we not learning the lessons of the first wave here?
Well, I disagree with respect, because you just heard Sir David Navarro talk about us learning the lessons. We learned the lessons around Sage in terms of making sure that we target very, very quickly, which is what we're doing now, which is what we're doing in Woking. Now, one of our strengths is the ability to sequence the variants rapidly in the UK, and we're offering that to the UK, which is to your question. If you're able to I will.
Sorry, we're losing you slightly there.
Forgive me.
Hopefully you can still hear me okay, Mr. Zahawi.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Just finally, I just want to ask you a little bit about vaccine passports. We've seen countries like Denmark and Sweden say they're looking at introducing these vaccine passports. So if you have a vaccine, you can travel into the country. Are we looking at the possibility of creating them here?
No, we're not. We have, as of yesterday, given the first dose to 11.5 million people, and what they get is a card from their NHS with their name on it, and of course, the date they've been vaccinated with the first dose, and then the date for their second dose. One, we don't know the impact of the vaccines on transmission. Two, it would be discriminatory, and I think the right thing to do is to make sure that people come forward, be vaccinated because they want to, rather than it being made in some way mandatory through a passport or others. If other countries obviously require some form of proof, then you can ask your GP, because your GP will hold the record, and of course that will then be vaccine. But we are not planning to have a passport in the UK. I just want to repeat that because I've had a lot of it on my social media. There are small startup technology companies that have had some funding from UKRI and Innovate UK who are looking at apps in this area, but we are certainly not looking to introduce it as part of the vaccine deployment programme.
Just quickly, because I know how important this is for so many of our viewers in the lockdown. We've talked a lot about how well they've warned of a fourth wave if restrictions are eased too quickly. There are reports today that NHS providers wants to wait till infections have fallen 95% on current levels before easing restrictions. How long should we be bracing ourselves for these restrictions to keep going for?
Well, our target is obviously to have given the first dose to the top four most vulnerable cohorts by mid-February. So that's the 15th of February, when we will look and review all the data. We've got a couple of big pieces of research, one in care homes, testing every day, one with frontline healthcare workers testing every day, which will give us much better data in terms of the impact of the vaccine on infections and transmission. The Prime Minister will then come to Parliament on the 22nd of February, as he quite rightly agreed and has targeted, and then talk about how we're going to gradually, first of all, reopen schools on the 8th of March, if all goes well, and then gradually reopen the whole of our economy. But we have to be obviously mindful that we want to make it based on the evidence of the vaccine efficacy and the impact, obviously, on transmission, hospitalization, and death ultimately. It's a race against death, Sophie, that I keep reminding anyone who's willing to listen to me, and which is why we're moving so rapidly to vaccinate and protect those most vulnerable cohorts. The 1 to 9 is 99% of death from COVID.